negotiator for the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Mr. Scully.
President Bush has said continuously that he wants a road to peace by the end of his administration. Will it happen in the next 7 to 8 months?
I hope so. I really hope so. I think it's critical that it will happen because I think what people don't realize in the United States, that pursuing region in the Middle East between Palestinians and Israelis is also a U.S. national interest. The U.S. borders today are no longer with Canada and Mexico and the two oceans. The borders are with Turkey, I think, Iran, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Gulf, Saudi, Syria, Jordan. You have 160,000 kids in this region fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I really believe that to win in Afghanistan and Iraq, to have the moderates win and to have democracy prevail, you need two things in this region. Number one is peace between Palestinians and Israelis, and that's the two-state solution. You don't need to reinvent the wheel there. And the second is democracy in the Arab world. So I believe if President Bush can pull this peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis, this is the turning point in this region going in the direction of moderation and peace. Failure to do so by the end of the year, I think we're going to go down the drain.
Just before Christmas in Annapolis, Maryland, a summit that brought in all parties, and the president saying that he would be fully engaged in the process and provide U.S. assistance to all parties. So far, has he kept his promise?
He did. He came to the region in January. Dr. Rice came, I think, about 6 times between Annapolis and now. Vice President Cheney came. National Security Advisor Steve Hudley came. Dr. Rice will be coming on the first week of May. The president will be coming to the region again in the middle of May.
Coming to the region in mid-May, but he's not going to visit the Palestinian territory. Why?
He's coming to attend the Israeli celebration of the 60th anniversary of Israel's creation. That day for us is what we call the Palestinian catastrophe, the Nakba. It's a very disastrous day in our history where Palestine ceased to exist. And we hope that one day we will end the suffering and we can both celebrate our independence, Palestine and Israel. But we will meet President Bush, President Abbas and his team will meet President Bush in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
Our guest will be with us for the next 45 minutes as we talk about the situation in the Middle East, our relations with the Palestinian territory, and Mahmoud Abbas, who met with President Bush yesterday at the White House. Our phone lines are open, by the way, 202-737-0001 for Republicans and 202-737-0002 if you're a Democrat. Here's part of what the president had to say in what's called a photo op in the Oval Office following his meeting with Prime Minister Abbas.
I'm confident we can achieve the definition of a state. I'm also confident it's going to require hard work. To that end, I'm going back to the Middle East. Looking forward to meeting you, sir. And thank you for making time. I consider you a friend. I also consider you a courageous person. And I'm also will believe strongly that when history looks back at this moment, and a state is defined, that the Palestinian people will thank you for your leadership.
From the president yesterday in the Oval Office, Saeb Erekat, who is the chief negotiator for Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, is the Prime Minister negotiating from a position of strength as he tries to bring together all the elements, all the parties, all the factions in the Palestinian territories?
Well, if you refer to Hamas coup d'etat in Gaza and the whole situation, I think we have the very deep wound among Palestinians. Hamas is a Palestinian party. Hamas won the elections against my party, fair and square. President Abbas was the one who made these elections happen. He refused to delay the elections. President Abbas, when he was elected as the president of the Palestinian Authority, said, I will take the Palestinian people towards the path of democracy and elections. The elections were carried out, and then Hamas formed the first government. In our constitution, our basic law, the government must accept the program of the president. Hamas refused. And then I was elected also in my speech in asking Mr. Haniyeh, the Prime Minister of Hamas. I told him, today you're not the Prime Minister of Hamas. You are my Prime Minister. You are the Prime Minister of all Palestinians. Today, you must differentiate between you being a Prime Minister and being Hamas. There are obligations on the Palestinian Authority. The two-state solution, recognition of Israel, renouncing violence, accepting international legitimacy. See what Imam Khomeini did when he took power in Iran. See what Nelson Mandela did when he took power after the apartheid regime. Winning the elections doesn't give you the right to say, since I won the elections, I cannot accept agreements signed between the PLO and Israel. I cannot recognize Israel. I cannot do that. So what we urge Mr. Haniyeh and the government to do is to accept the obligations of the Palestinian Authority. And I believe democracy did not fail. It was this position that failed us. Today we have Gaza. We lost Gaza to Hamas. It was very serious occurrences. And in this, by the way, if we don't help ourselves, nobody else will. I really call upon Hamas to resent from the coup and adhere to the Palestinian constitution. That's what's needed today. And if we don't help ourselves, nobody else will.
A fundamentally basic question to what everyone knows has been a complex historic issue. Why can't this issue be resolved?
Well, that's a very good question. And, you know, many people ask me, if you know that the solution will be a two-state solution, how come you didn't have the solution so far? Look, this is not the issue of conflict between Peru and Ecuador. It's not a Jordanian-Saudi Arabia border. It's not Iraq-Jordan's border. Issues like Jerusalem border settlements, refugees, is what makes Palestinians and Israelis breathe. This is the faith, the survival, the psychology, the security. And I think Palestinians and Israelis have been coming a long, long, long way through one of the most difficult labor pains in history of man. It's 20 years ago, literally, I couldn't even say the word Israel. 20 years ago, Israelis were not even saying Palestinians, they said we did not even exist. So we believed in a zero sum. We must produce a winner and a loser. Today, this is changing. Today, 70% of Palestinians and 70% of Israelis are saying it's going to be a two-state solution. The uniqueness of our conflict is either produce two winners through peace or two losers through the continuation of conflict. I'll give you an example about the changes, Steve. 10 years ago, I come from a hometown called Jericho in the West Bank. That's my constituency, that's where I live. If Palestinians used to carry a Palestinian flag, they would be shot and killed by the Israeli army. Last week, when President Abbas went to see Mr. Olmert, the Prime Minister of Israel, in his residence in West Jerusalem, they stood to shake hands, and behind President Abbas there were two flags, and Mr. Olmert. An Israeli flag and a Palestinian flag that's bigger than the flag in my office. Things are changing. Things are getting to be there because, you know, Christian and Muslim Palestinians will not convert to Judaism and become Israelis. Jews will not convert to Christianity and Islam and become Palestinians. So we know the end game. We know the definition of an end game. It is two-state solution. How come it's not happening? Because some people still believe that God should be employed for wars and so on. Some people, psychologically, the mistrust between the two people. And we have to go through a very, very painful pattern. At the end of the day, I did not wake up one morning, Steve, and felt my conscience aching for the Israeli people and their suffering. Neither did they. They did not wake up and felt their conscience for my suffering. I'm doing this peace process for myself. It's not a job. Steve, for me, I don't want my son to be a suicide bomber. I want him just to be like your children. I want my son, Ali, who's 20 years old now, to have the chance to be the physician, the soccer player, the musician, just like your children. And that's what's peace for me. And I'm sure that many of my Israeli colleagues don't want to send their children to schools with bus exploding. We want to normalize. We have difficulties. We need help. I don't think President Bush can make the decisions for us. I don't think the Arabs can make decisions for us. I don't think anybody can make decisions for us. It's going to be Palestinians and Israelis who are going to make the decision. President Abbas, you referred about his strengths and weaknesses. I believe President Abbas so far had demonstrated that he is the most courageous Palestinian leader of the last decades. He's saying, I want to reach an agreement before the end of the year. He knows it's going to be a two-state solution. He knows what's going to have to be done in many of the painful decisions he has to make. And I believe if he signs an agreement for the end game, I think he'll be the most important Palestinian since Jesus walked the streets of Jerusalem. And if Mr. Olmert, people say weakness or not weakness, if he signs an agreement for the end game, a historic solution with Palestinians, he'll be the most important person since Jesus walked the streets of Jerusalem.
Our focus is the situation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Our guest, Saeb Erekat, who represents the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas. As always, we welcome your phone calls. And you can also email us, journal@cspan.org, Northport, Florida. Good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. I would just like to say to the today that to me, Palestine, I understand. I just want you to know that there's Christians out here that did vote for President Bush. And we know that, I believe that everybody is not blinded like President Bush, and that there are believers out here in the United States of America, and I want Palestine to know this, and the world to know this, that I'm a believer. I believe in Jesus Christ, that he's the only Son of God. People that are Muslims do not believe that. People that are Mormons don't believe that. People that are Jehovah's Witness don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. They believe he's a prophet. In the Bible, it says that those are Antichrist. Anybody that denies that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Now, if you really want peace, you don't want a two-state solution. God made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not Ishmael. And if you want to war against God, go right ahead. You can war against God. But in Zechariah it says, any nation that comes against Israel, I will destroy that nation.
Mr. Erekat?
Well, I'm a Muslim myself. I sent my children to a Catholic school in my hometown, Jericho. I studied there. And I believe that my God, as much as your God, is the same God. He's a God of peace and a God of reconciliation. I don't care if your world is divided between those who are pro-Israelis and those who are pro-Palestinian. God's world is divided between those who are pro-peace and those who are against peace. What Palestinians and Israelis, you living in the United States, we send our children to the cemeteries, Palestinians and Israelis. And we want our children to take us to the cemeteries. So please don't employ God for more hatred and bloodshed. The God of the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews is a God of reconciliation and healing. I come from a hometown called Jericho. I see the Mount of Temptation, where Jesus did his fast for 40 days. I walked 2 minutes away from my home to Zacchaeus tree. We have so much history and belief. I have more than 17 churches in my hometown. There's so many Palestinian Christians, and yet I do not condone the killing of Jews or the sacrificing of any Israelis or the killing of Palestinians or Christians just simply because they're Jews or Christians and Muslims. God is a God of healing, a God of peace, a God of reconciliation. So please, be with those who are pro-peace, because we're sick and tired of those who are pro-Israel, pro-Palestinians, and those who want to take Palestinians and Israelis towards the end of killing their children, their daughters, and this conflict cannot continue. God wants peace, and please help us to make this peace.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is next. Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to say that last lady that called, I'm Christian also, but I'm just so happy to hear his response because it's, I know God does not want people to keep killing each other over religion. And one thing that stands out in the Bible most to me is says, judge and thou shalt be judged. It's not our place to judge anybody else. And it would just be a wonderful, wonderful thing. I really feel that the world is heading toward a new era of hope and peace.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cranston, Rhode Island, good morning to you.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Erekat. Mr. Erekat, I've been watching C-SPAN for so many years. My heart it bleeds for the Palestinian people. The Israelis, 65%, the Palestinian people, 65%, they want peace. But you have the radicals, you have those that they want to put in this whole world in a big catastrophe. And the big catastrophe, and just like that lady that called up from Florida, she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know what's going on to kill Palestinian children. They don't know what it is to suffer. I grew up in Greece with no father, with no mother, with no shoes, with nobody to give me anything. And I understand what the Palestinian people, and I feel that President Bush for 7 years, he hasn't done nothing for the Palestinian people. And I'm sorry to say that this is all window dressing.
Your response?
It's very difficult to be a Palestinian. It's very difficult to be a Palestinian father. It's very difficult to be a Palestinian mother. It's very difficult to be a Palestinian person. But that's the more reason why we should strive to achieve peace. That's the more reason why I say that we don't do the Israelis any favor in this peace process. That's what I say. It's the hatred cycle will just generate more hatred. The killing fields will generate more killing fields. I'm not here as a poet. I know that life is not about charitable organizations. throughout the history of mankind, negotiations and peace reflected two things: interests and needs. And today there are no paramount interests and needs for Israelis and Palestinians other than to achieve peace based on a two-state solution, a Palestinian state living in peace and security next to the state of Israel and the 67 border. This can be done, and we should do it, and it's really a big crime if we fail to do it before the end of this year.
Our guest is Saeb Erekat. He is the chief negotiator for the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Our phone lines are open, and our email address, journal@cspan.org. Dothan, Alabama, Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. The lady that called, and not necessarily just the lady that called earlier. There's several. The gentleman that called just prior to my call. First I think there may be a lot of politics involved, but the United States had a heck of a lot to do with this deal in the Palestinian question there now, by taking, putting a state, a Jewish state, right there in the middle of a situation that has been going on for 2,500 years, and then you're building mosques on top of synagogues. You're building synagogues on top of mosques, and these kids, these kids growing up, really, the Muslim. On a survey I read just very recently, it was a survey that a lot of the moderate people, say like me, a moderate Christian, if you want to say, and then you take a moderate Muslim. They don't really participate in a lot of the things, a lot of the politics. But if their children, one of the kids goes and blows himself up and kills a bunch of innocent people, then his parents, they praise. They're so happy for the martyrism. If this religion, goodness, would just, if there's some sort of settlement on this religion, it seems like every time you turn around, it's Jesus Christ and God in heaven and Allah and Muhammad, and if there's some way to round this thing out, it would. Of course, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Appreciate the call from Alabama.
Well, I think as a Muslim myself, I think we're supposed to go to mosques to worship God. And as Christians, you're supposed to go to churches to worship God. And as Jews, people should go to synagogues to worship God. And the minute people start going to churches, mosques, and synagogues to use God, that's a problem. I think God values life. The God of the Christians and the God of the Jews and the God of the Muslims is the same God, is the one God. And I believe today the employment of religion to further the conflict and to deepen the conflict is absolutely alien to the basic philosophy, to the basic concept of God's messages to us as human beings. And okay, I cannot stand guards on anybody's lips. I cannot stand guards on anybody's belief or faith. But I don't see any difference between the teachings of Christianity and Islam and Judaism when it comes to human values and to human rights and to saving lives. And if people want to go to churches and mosques and synagogues to use God, what you're talking about there, what the lady talked about, is the life of my son. It's the life of my Israeli colleagues' sons. And believe me, we are no less of a parents and feelings more than you. I know that many people in the region have discarded the image of Islam and Muslims because they're employing religion for their political ends. But at the end of the day, this is the greatness of the Middle East. We have three great religions, and that's why making peace is the job of all those who truly believe in God.
Two developments in your region I'd like to get your reaction to. First, the Washington Times again reporting today about Syria and its role with North Korea. Let me just quote from Sarah Carter and Bill Gertz. Intelligence officials saying that there is mounting evidence collected over the past 10 years revealing that North Korea and Syria had begun nuclear cooperation dating as back as early 1997 during a prior Syrian administration led by Hafez al-Assad.
Well, the Syrian government has officially denied the whole story. I don't have any collection of what takes place, but I want to make one point here, Steve. Denial, or what the Congress saw yesterday, which we didn't see, I think that's why we need to have peace in the region. That's why we need to bring Syria on board. That's why we need to bring Palestinians and Israelis on board. That's why we need to have a peace agreement that covers the whole region, and we need to make our region a nuclear-free zone. Israel is a country that possesses nuclear weapons today, and look, they possess nuclear weapons, 5,000 tanks, 2,500 planes, and yet they claim they don't have security. And by the way, security cannot be attained through might and nuclear weapons and so on. Destruction is derived through these things. Security is derived through fairness, peace, economic development, and good life. And that's what we need to do. And I think this story about Syrian nuclear attempts, which the Syrian government denied, should be an eye-opener to all of us, that every possible effort should be made in order to achieve peace between all conflicting parties in the region.
Also this morning, front page of USA Today on the Iraqi forces, and the essence of the story from Matt Kelly is that Iraq is not yet ready to use its own forces. Over the last 5 years, this administration and Congress are approving about $20 billion to train and equip the Iraqi forces, the police and the military in that country. And now, as you know, Congress is about to take up a $108 billion request by the president that Congress needs to discuss. And yet, over the last 5 years, according to this latest study, Iraq's military not yet ready. What does this all mean?
Look, Iraq is a great nation. The Iraqi people are a great people. Iraqis have suffered more than enough, and they will be ready. I don't know exactly when they will be ready, but I think that the political process in Iraq should continue, and I believe that achieving peace between Palestinians and Israelis will directly impact positively on getting Iraq back on track. And I think all nations on earth, especially Arab nations, must seek to help the Iraqis in order to go with the political process and achieve their capabilities that will enable them to be once again a strong, stable, and secure nation.
Our next call from New York City. Good morning for Saeb Erekat. Go ahead, please.
How you doing? I was kind of shocked when I heard that first caller, even though I guess I shouldn't be. But you know, the people who are saying that we need to only support Israel's policies because Israel because the Jews are the chosen people of God, don't understand what our Constitution says about there being a separation of church and state. We're not supposed to make political decisions based on your biblical interpretations of things. In fact, most of our founding fathers were deists and not Christians. So the only premise that we really need to keep in America is that people have the right to practice whatever religion they wish without persecution.
I agree with that. I really agree that God is the God of everyone, and I don't think God advocates people to kill each other or to destroy each other. And God is not a land broker. It's much bigger than this. But I cannot stand gods in the way people think. But this is not faith to advocate that my children should be killed because somebody wants them to be killed in the name of God. I cannot accept this. But I cannot really say other than anything. I want to live and let live. I'm a Palestinian, and Christian and Muslim Palestinians will not convert to Judaism and become Israelis. Jews will not convert to Christianity and Islam and become Palestinians. So help me out. There is no option other than the two-state solution. And the sooner we do it, the more lives we will save. And that's what God wants us to do.
A couple of emails, one from Chris Hutton, who says, I may lean toward Israel only because I feel more in common with them, but your guest, Saeb Erekat, is amazing. What an insightful man. If I could ask a question, I want to know who is his counterpart in Israel. I find it so hard to picture anyone as level-headed as him not being able to work out solutions if he could get a partner in Israel who could use the same sane reasoning in their approach to these very difficult issues.
There are partners in Israel. Israeli negotiators are serving their countries, and they are getting there. We're developing. If you take Saeb Erekat 15 years ago, I wasn't like this. As I told you, I couldn't even mention the term Israel. But then things develop. We change. We're changing. We're going through the most difficult labor pains as Palestinians and Israelis. But Israelis, just like you and I, they don't want their children to be killed. They don't want to be, in this abnormal situation. They're just as normal as you are, as I am, and I'm as normal as they are. And I think we will get there. We will get there not because it's something that we seek to do in luxury. We're getting there because this is survival for us.
So the follow-up then, this email from a viewer in New York, what specific points in the negotiation in the next few months do you believe will be the largest hurdles for both sides to reach an agreement?
I think all points are difficult. We're having 6 issues reserved for the negotiations we're doing now. That is Jerusalem, borders, settlements, refugees, water, security, relations, and prisoners. And I believe we have turned every possible stone. We know what the outcome will be. And the outcome is 2 states living side by side in peace and security. And we're getting there. I cannot reveal the ongoing negotiations details. I'm not saying that the gaps are bridged totally, but I'm saying we are getting there. We need people to stand shoulder to shoulder with us in order to help us staying the course. I'm not saying that people can make decisions for us. The decisions come from us, Palestinians, and from Israelis, not from President Bush. But we want President Bush, we want the Europeans, we want the Arabs to stay shoulder to shoulder with us and to make sure that once an agreement is reached, they will create all support systems to implement it.
And during this process, our guest, Saeb Erekat, is the chief negotiator for the Palestinian people and President Mahmoud Abbas. Our next call is from Brandywine, Maryland. Good morning on the Democrats line.
Good morning. I am so impressed with your guest. This is the first time I've ever heard a Palestinian so level-headed. And I'm a Christian, by the way, and I really want peace in the Middle East. I've been praying that there will be peace between those 2 states. Palestinians should know that Israel is not going anywhere. And like he said, I want the children of Palestine and Israelis to be able to live in peace, because there is nothing like peace. I am so disturbed when I see the violence that happens in that region. And every time we pray there will be peace. And this is the first time I've heard somebody who have really touched me with his opinions and values. And believe you me, I really want peace in that region. And I pray there will be more people like you.
Thanks for the call.
I think today 70% of Palestinian people, have committed themselves to the 2-state solution, have committed themselves to achieve peace with Israelis through peaceful means, void of violence. I'm not saying that we don't have an overloaded wagon of complexities. We have our internal difficulties. We have a very difficult transition that we're going through. We have a long way in our reform program, institution building, and we need help. And I think all Palestinians, just like you, they want to live as free people, as independent people, and I think all should stand with us in order to achieve this endeavor, because that's how we're going to defeat the forces of extremism in our region.
Our next call comes to us from Chicago, Republican line. Good morning.
Hi, yes. 2 quick questions. I was wondering, in the Palestinian people, is there still heavy remnants of animosity towards Fatah and the PLO for its past corruption? And also, do you see a nearby problem in the escalating population of Palestine overflowing into Israel-controlled locations?
Well, I think, if I understood you, you asked about Palestinian corruption. I'm not going to deny that we're just as normal as you are, like any society. We have faced cases of corruption. We're dealing with it. We're learning through the job. We're not yet in a state. We're still under Israeli occupation. And I really believe that Palestinian survival will depend on our ability to create a Palestinian system of accountability, transparency, and the rule of law. I don't think as a nation we may just be like you with a country with a navy, an army, and air force. I think we'll be a country of limitations. But I think our survival will depend largely on our ability to create a democracy, the rule of law, the one authority, the one gun, transparency and accountability. And I believe with you fully that with all those who want to help us in creating this Palestinian state on this, based on these values. As far as your question about Palestinians going to Israeli-controlled areas, I think it's Israel that's coming to settle, have more settlements, more dictations, more walls in the land that's supposed to be the Palestinian state. See, the idea, what people don't understand, historic Palestine from the River Jordan, where I live, to the Mediterranean, is actually divided. 78% is what we call Israel today. 78% of this historic Palestine, which we have recognized to live in peace and security. Now what we're trying to achieve is an independent Palestinian state in the remaining 22% of the land. That's the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. So what the Israelis did over the past 40 years, they have established more settlements, Israeli settlements, in the heart of the West Bank, and these settlements have become the most difficult obstacles to achieve peace, and that's what we're trying to negotiate. And I really hope and pray that the Israelis will make the decisions required to achieve peace, because settlements and peace don't go together. And I hope that the choice will be for peace.
Quick follow-up, though. Some have referred to this Palestinian territory or country as kind of Swiss cheese. You have the West Bank, you have the Gaza Strip. Can it work as a nation as you look at this map and you see these two very important parts of the Palestinian territory where you have this division, of course, being Israel? Can geographically, I understand historically, but geographically, can it work?
Well, geographically, what we're talking about in the West Bank is a state for the Palestinian people, Israel for the Israeli people, okay? And now, if you're asking me, is a Palestinian state viable with all these settlements spread out throughout the West Bank? No, it's impossible. It's impossible to have a state. That's the reference to the Swiss cheese with holes. We have no contiguity, no water aquifers, and I don't think our children can draw a map in their geography classes with such a Swiss cheese map. But the point is, that's where the difficulties of the discussion. That's what we mean when we say that settlements are an obstacle to peace. And I really once again say that Israel will choose the path of peace and not settlements.
An email from a viewer in Columbia, Maryland, who asked, do you really believe that peace is possible this year? I see no progress. You should discuss the West Bank treatment of the Palestinians, and then asking this, when will you form a unity government?
Well, I mean, I take what you say about national unity government. We formed a national unity government, and then the Prime Minister, who is the Interior Minister, committed the strategic mistake of waging a coup d'etat, controlling Gaza by force, which is, I think, part of the Palestinian transition. We have an overloaded wagon of complexities. Once again, I'm not denying the difficulties we face internally, but in this, it's going to have to be us, Palestinians, solving this problem. There will not be a military solution. I hope Hamas is a political Palestinian party, but the road to democracy means that we must establish the one authority, the one gun, the rule of law, obligations. We have to be part of this international system. We cannot be an observer member of the UN, and comes a Palestinian party and says, no, we cannot accept UN resolutions. Or we member of the Arab League, and comes a Palestinian party and says, we cannot accept the Arab Peace Initiative. But at the end of the day, this is a Palestinian problem. We're working it out, and I hope that we can reconcile. Once we reach an agreement with Israel, we're going to put this agreement to national public referendum. And if people say yes, that's it, we prevail. If people say no, that's their choice. As far as the question of reaching the agreement, yes, I think it's possible. I think today we need decisions and not negotiations, and decisions can be done by leaders.
If you're listening on C-SPAN Radio, our guest is Saeb Erekat, and our conversation focusing on the situation in the Middle East, the Palestinian territory specifically, and President Bush's next visit to Israel, marking that country's 60th anniversary, and his visits to Egypt to further negotiate the situation between the Arabs and the Israelis. Our guest is the chief negotiator to President Mahmoud Abbas, and our next call is from Indianapolis. Good morning.
Hi, how's it going? I just want to say that, first off, I agree with you on a lot of the religion things you're saying, on how pretty much if you study all these different religions, what most people don't realize is that they all pretty much say close to the same thing, like morally and ethically, and, you know, basically what's right and what's wrong and what should be done. And it's not that, and everyone is colliding. And it's more like everyone needs to learn that everyone complements each other, and we actually need each other to exist. And I think we've just been built up with all these falsities and hatreds and angers and things that aren't really what we should be believing. I think probably the first lesson that everyone needs to learn would be the first lesson of a Zen monk to his new student. And he would first pour him a glass of tea until his cup starts overflowing. And then the student would say, sir, the glass is full, why do you keep pouring? And he would say, like your mind, how can I fill it if it is already full? And that is what we need.
But caller, do you think we can get there?
Well, I don't know. Really, I think it's like he said, by fighting and militaries and armies, it's never going to work because that's conflict. And we need to complement each other and help each other. Peace and, you know, working together is really the only true security.
Thanks for the call from Indianapolis. Let me follow up on the caller's point because there's a related email from A.F. Nariman who lives in Williamsville, New York, asking this question to you, Mr. Erekat, as the chief negotiator for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Why, if the United Nations could give birth to the State of Israel in 1948, can't they do the same for the Palestinian state in 2008?
I think they should. I really think that's the whole purpose of the creation of the Quartet International Committee composed of the United States, European Union, the UN, and the Russian Federation. And I think the birth certificate of the State of Palestine will signify stability in the region. But I want to make, if I can answer the question, because the question you keep asking, Steve, is it possible? If you know that the definition is a Palestinian state, and says, why can't you do it? This reminded me of a joke. You know, a Palestinian and Israeli go to a cowboy movie, a Western US movie, and the star is really riding on the horse at the beginning of the movie, and the Israeli, as usual, looked at the Palestinian and said, $20. He will fall from the back of his horse in 1 minute. And the Palestinian, as usual, without thinking, yes, you're on. In 1 minute, the star fell. So the Palestinian carries the $20 and said to the Israelis, you won. So the Israeli said, no, my conscience, I cannot take it. The Palestinian says, why? He said, I've seen this movie before. So the Palestinian said, what do you think? I also saw it, but I thought he learned from his mistakes. I hope that we learn from our mistakes in order to achieve the two-state solution. I really do.
Well, let me follow up with this email from Michael Lame, who says, why not a three-state solution? Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank.
It's impossible. It's impossible. Gaza cannot survive without the West Bank. The West Bank cannot survive without an outlet with Gaza. And we're one people. Gaza and the West Bank is a single territorial unit. I know the difficulties. I know all the questions in people's mind, in my wife's mind about Gaza, what we're going to do with Gaza. If we reach an agreement, by the way, Hamas does not dispute the fact that Abu Mazen, President Abbas, is the one with the jurisdiction over negotiations. If we reach a peace treaty, we're going to put it to national public referendum, and that's where Palestinians will really transit towards independence and freedom and unity.
So you're a negotiator and a part-time comedian?
I'll try to do that.
Let's go to Chicago next. Good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. Question, and it's a three-part question. First is a statement.
How about if we take one at a time?
All right, it's very simple and very clear, because we debate the issue here in America constantly in regards to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It seems to actually be a trigger as to everything else that's perceived to be going wrong here and abroad. My question to you, sir, is with the United States calling Israel its number one ally in the region, do you believe if we really put down our hands that we can actually stop all this conflict? And if that is the case, what do you think is the thing that will actually stop the conflict? If you had one line to say to everybody in the world, this is what we need to do to bring peace, what would that actually be?
Okay, we'll come back for your follow-up.
To have a Palestinian state created in the 67 lines to live in peace and security next to the state of Israel. Look, ever since Eve negotiated Adam, I'm the most disadvantaged negotiator in history. I have no army, no navy, no air force. My people are fragmented. If it's my word against any Israeli in your Senate and your Congress, I don't stand a chance. I know all of this. You know all of this. But the U.S. today is seeking its national interests also. This region cannot moderate, cannot stabilize, cannot develop without drying the swamps of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, without the creation of Palestinian state. So you should understand it. I'm pursuing my national interest. I'm pursuing my need as a Palestinian. They're pursuing their needs as Israelis in this peace process. And the U.S. is also pursuing their interests and needs. And if you look at it this way, you'll see how much possible for decisions to be made and to make the year 2008 a year of peace.
Was it Abba Eban who said the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity?
I was 12 years old when the Israeli occupation came to my hometown, Jericho. And I really believed in this. You know, Palestinians lived. And okay, I'm a Palestinian now. I was 12 years old when the Israeli occupation came to my hometown, Jericho. I wasn't born in 1948, all right? I'm a father of twin daughters and 2 sons. I'm going to be a grandfather next week, actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I really didn't want my children to grow under occupation. I didn't want my grandchildren to grow under occupation, all right? This is what's in it for me. This is exactly what I'm trying to do in the two-state solution. So what opportunity do I miss today when I say I recognize Israel's right to exist in peace and security in the two-state solution? I accepted Israel to live in 78% of historic Palestine, to live in peace and security next to the state of Palestine. What is it that I'm doing wrong? What is it I'm missing when they insist to have settlements in the West Bank to say this and to try to make peace among themselves in their negotiating behavior, and then sometimes come to me and say, come here, boy, we know what's best for you. You must accept this. If we don't, we're going to go to the Congress, the Senate, and so on. This is destroying us as moderates. This is strengthening extremists in this region. What I'm saying here, all right, we missed the opportunities, but today, are we missing an opportunity when we say to the Israelis that we recognize you, we're going to live in peace with you, let us make this Palestinian state come through peace and negotiations and not through violence? I hope that everyone is watching what President Abbas is doing nowadays in order to make peace. And it's all because we don't want us and ourselves and the Israelis to miss the opportunities, because we stand to lose, all of us.
We have about a minute left. Quick call from Algonac, Michigan. Good morning to you. Go ahead, caller, very briefly.
I'm a 82-year-old veteran, World War II, and of course I've followed the Israeli-Palestinian conflict since 1947, so I know a little bit about it. But I have a challenge for you, Mr. Erekat. I would like to propose something to you that I would seriously love you to consider. Would you be willing to take Pope Benedict XVI and have him as an impartial arbitrator to resolve all your problems there?
Thanks for the call.
Well, I think I would appreciate this very much. If His Holiness the Pope, who's a man of peace and who's teaching every Sunday, is calling upon Palestinians and Israelis to have peace, and he's calling on the world to end the Palestinian people's suffering, I think he's a fair man, he's a great man, and I think his efforts and his prayers are very much needed for Christians and Muslims and Palestinians in order to achieve peace in the region.
Saeb Erekat, who is the chief negotiator for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, thanks very much for joining us and sharing with us your perspective on the situation and what's next in the process.
Thank you, Steve. I hope you like the joke.
Please come back again. Absolutely. Anytime.